Someone is controlling your decisions right now. They've been doing it for weeks. And the most terrifying part, every choice you think is yours was actually theirs. I'm going to prove it to you in the next few minutes. There's a psychological pattern that have destroyed more successful people or leaders than war, scandal, or revolution combined. And it's happening to you and someone you know right now. I mean, something so tragic it will take you from your top level down to zero, with nothing left for you to manage or scrap from your life ever again. The truth is, you will destroy yourself if you ignore what I'm about to share in the video. I'm talking about the mental traps that don't announce themselves. They don't come with warning signs or dramatic moments. They slip into your mind like a whisper, and before you realize what's happening, you've already lost everything you built. If you've ever wondered why brilliant leaders or successful people suddenly collapse, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see power forever. Here's what nobody tells you about leadership psychology. Your brain is wired to destroy your own authority. Every successful person carries within them 7 psychological triggers that can be activated by anyone who knows how to pull them. And once triggered, these mental patterns don't just damage your reputation. They rewire your entire decision-making process, and that's how you self-destruct yourself. The scariest part, you won't even know it's happening. You'll think you're being strategic, diplomatic, or wise, but in reality, you're systematically dismantling everything that made you powerful in the first place. I discovered this pattern after studying the downfall of 47 different leaders across politics, business, and social movements. Every single one followed the same psychological sequence. Every single one fell victim to the same 7 triggers, and every single one could have saved themselves if they'd understood what was happening in their own mind. But here's the twist that'll make your stomach drop. The people who activate these triggers aren't your enemies. They're the ones closest to you. They're the ones you trust most. They're the ones who smile at you every day, while systematically programming your mind for self-destruction. Drop a comment right now if you've ever felt like someone was manipulating your thoughts, but couldn't quite put your finger on how they were doing it. Because what I'm about to show you will make everything crystal clear. Trigger 1, the validation trap. The first psychological trigger is the most dangerous because it feels like love. It's called the validation trap, and it works by turning your need for approval into a weapon against yourself. Here's how it starts. Someone begins giving you exactly the validation you've been craving. Not generic praise, specific, targeted validation that hits your deepest insecurities. They notice things about you that others miss. They appreciate qualities you've always hoped people would see. But here's the psychological twist. They're not validating you, they're studying you. Every compliment is a probe. Every bit of praise is data collection. They're mapping your emotional weak points with surgical precision. And then comes the moment that changes everything. Just when you're most dependent on their validation, they withdraw it. Not dramatically, that would be too obvious. They do it gradually, subtly, leaving you wondering if you've done something wrong. Your brain enters panic mode. Suddenly, you're changing your behavior, your decisions, your entire leadership style just to get that validation back. You don't even realize you're doing it. You think you're being responsive to feedback, but really, you've handed control of your psychology to someone else. Comment below if you've ever found yourself changing who you are just to get someone's approval back. This is more common than you think. Trigger 2, the complexity overload. The second trigger is called complexity overload, and it's devastating because it attacks your decision-making process directly. Here's how it works. When you're facing a decision, someone starts flooding you with information. Not wrong information, that would be easy to spot. Complex, nuanced, technically accurate information that makes every choice seem equally valid and equally dangerous. They present you with 17 different perspectives on a problem that should have 3 solutions. They introduce variables you'd never considered. They make you question assumptions you didn't even know you had. And here's the devastating part. Your brain wasn't designed to process this level of complexity under pressure. When overwhelmed with too much information, your mind does something called decision paralysis. You stop making choices altogether, which means you stop leading. But the real psychological manipulation hasn't even started yet. Because while you're paralyzed by complexity, They're making the decisions for you, and you're grateful for it. Trigger 3, the moral inversion. The third trigger is called moral inversion, and it's the most insidious because it turns your own ethics against you. Here's the pattern. They start questioning not your decisions, but your motivations. They don't say you're wrong, they say you're selfish. They don't attack your competence, they attack your character. They make you feel guilty for having power in the first place. They go like this: don't you think the team should have more input? Isn't this decision a bit authoritarian? Are you sure you're considering everyone's feelings? These aren't questions. They're psychological weapons designed to make you second-guess your right to lead. Your brain starts creating what psychologists call moral anxiety. You begin questioning whether you deserve your position. You start making decisions based not on what's effective, but on what makes you feel like a good person. You're no longer leading, you're performing goodness for an audience that will never be satisfied. Has anyone ever made you feel guilty for being successful? Drop a comment and let me know how they did it, because these patterns are everywhere. Trigger 4, the emotional flooding. The fourth trigger is emotional flooding, and it's designed to hijack your rational decision-making by overwhelming you with feelings. Here's how it works. Just before important decisions, they create emotional chaos. They bring up unrelated personal issues. They manufacture interpersonal drama. They flood your environment with emotional static that makes clear thinking impossible. But here's what's really happening. When your brain is overwhelmed with emotion, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for strategic thinking, goes offline. You start making decisions with your emotional brain, which means you're making decisions based on how you feel in the moment, not on long-term consequences. And the person creating this emotional chaos, they remain calm. They become your emotional anchor. They offer to help you process these feelings, to guide you through this difficult time. You don't realize they created the storm they're now offering to shelter you from. Trigger 5, the authority diffusion. The fifth trigger is authority diffusion, and it's psychological warfare disguised as collaboration. Here's the pattern. They start suggesting that important decisions should be made by committee. They propose that everyone should have equal input. They make you feel like a dictator for making unilateral choices. But here's the devastating psychological truth. When authority is diffused across multiple people, nobody is really in charge. And when nobody is in charge, the person who's best at manipulating group dynamics becomes the real leader. Comment if you've ever been in a collaborative environment where one person seemed to control every group decision without officially being in charge. Trigger 6, the identity erosion. The sixth trigger is identity erosion, and it's the most personal because it attacks who you think you are. They start telling you that you've changed, that success has made you different, that you're not the same person you used to be. They make you nostalgic for a version of yourself that was smaller, weaker, less threatening to them. Your brain enters what psychologists call identity crisis mode. You start trying to prove you haven't changed by making decisions that reflect your old self rather than your current position. You're no longer leading from where you are, you're leading from where you used to be. Trigger 7, the future anxiety. The seventh and final trigger is future anxiety, and it's designed to paralyze you with fear of what might happen. They start planting seeds of doubt about your decisions. What if this backfires? What if people turn against you? What if you're making a mistake? They don't offer solutions, they just amplify every possible negative outcome until you're too afraid to move forward. Let me tell you how I discovered this pattern the hard way. 3 years ago, I was running a company with 47 employees. I had someone on my team, let's call him Kelvin, who seemed like the perfect advisor, always thinking 3 steps ahead, always pointing out potential problems before they happened. At first, I thought he was brilliant. He'd say things like, "Have you considered what happens if this client pulls out?" Or, "What if the market shifts and we're stuck with this strategy?" I genuinely believed he was protecting me from making costly mistakes. But then I realized something terrifying. I had stopped making decisions altogether. Every time I had an idea, Kelvin would flood me with 17 different ways it could go wrong. Every opportunity became a minefield of potential disasters. I was paralyzed by possibilities that might never even happen. Here's what was really happening. Kelvin wasn't protecting me from bad decisions. He was protecting himself from my success. Every time I hesitated, every time I second-guessed myself, he gained more influence. While I was frozen by fear of the future, he was quietly positioning himself as the voice of reason everyone turned to. Comment below if you've ever had someone in your life who seemed to always see problems but never offered solutions. You're not paranoid, you are being manipulated. But here's the psychological mechanism that makes future anxiety so devastating. Your brain is evolutionarily wired to prioritize avoiding loss over achieving gain. It's called loss aversion, and it's why you'll work twice as hard to avoid losing $100 as you will to earn $100. When someone constantly feeds you worst-case scenarios, they're hijacking this ancient survival mechanism. Your brain starts treating every decision like a life-or-death situation. You become so focused on what you might lose that you forget what you could gain. And while you're paralyzed by imaginary futures, the person creating this anxiety is taking action. They're making the decisions you're too afraid to make. They're seizing the opportunities you're too scared to take. They're building their empire on the foundation of your fears. In my case, Kelvin eventually convinced the board that I was too indecisive for a leadership role. The same fears he had planted in my mind, he used as evidence against me. The psychological trap he created became the cage that held me. The day I realized what had happened, I felt something I'd never felt before, rage mixed with clarity. Not anger at Kelvin, but fury at myself for allowing someone else to hijack my psychology, for letting fear of imaginary futures destroy my actual present. But that rage saved me, because once you see these psychological patterns clearly, something incredible happens. They lose their power over you completely. It's like discovering the man behind the curtain in Wizard of Oz. The tricks that once seemed magical suddenly look pathetic. I started recognizing the validation trap when people gave me strategic compliments. I caught the complexity overload when someone buried me in unnecessary information. I spotted moral inversion when someone questioned my motivations instead of my methods. And here's what happened next. I became psychologically bulletproof, not because I stopped trusting people, but because I learned to trust my ability to see manipulation coming. I could engage with these tactics without being controlled by them. When someone tried the future anxiety trick on me, I'd simply ask, "What's your solution?" When they couldn't provide one, I knew they were manufacturing fear, not preventing problems. When someone used moral inversion, I'd say, "Let's focus on results, not intentions." When they tried complexity overload, I'd cut through it. What are the three most important factors here? But the real transformation wasn't just psychological, it was practical. Within 6 months, I had built a new company. Within a year, it was generating more revenue than my previous one ever did. Because when you're not paralyzed by psychological manipulation, you can move at the speed of opportunity. Drop a comment if you've ever felt like someone was holding you back by making you overthink every decision. Share this video with someone who needs to break free from these mental traps. Now let me give you the exact psychological protection protocol I use every day. When someone tries to trigger you psychologically, run through this mental checklist. First, what emotion are they trying to create in me? Fear, guilt, confusion, or dependency? Second, what decision are they trying to influence? Third, what do they gain if I react the way they want? Fourth, what would I do if this person wasn't in the room? If you can answer these 4 questions clearly, you're psychologically immune to that person's manipulation. It doesn't matter how skilled they are, how charming they seem, or how much they claim to care about you. Once you see the pattern, the spell is broken. This isn't just about leadership. These same 7 triggers are used in relationships, sales, politics, and social media. Every manipulative person you've ever encountered has used some variation of these patterns. The validation-seeking friend, the anxiety-inducing partner, the overcomplicated advisor, they're all running the same psychological software. But here's the most liberating truth of all. Once you understand these triggers, you don't just become immune to them, you become attractive to people who don't use them. Genuine people are drawn to psychological strength. Authentic relationships flourish when manipulation tactics don't work. If this video just changed how you see human psychology forever, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. Share this with 3 people who need to see it. Because understanding these patterns isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about elevating everyone around you. Remember Kelvin from my story? He reached out to me last month, wanted to reconnect and discuss opportunities. I listened to his pitch for exactly 4 minutes before I heard him deploy 3 of these psychological triggers. Old habits die hard. I politely declined. Not out of revenge, but out of respect for my own psychological boundaries. Because once you learn to protect your mind, you realize that your peace of mind is worth more than any opportunity that comes wrapped in manipulation. And if you want to learn the advanced psychological techniques that not only make you immune to manipulation, but actually help you identify manipulators within the first 30 seconds of meeting them, check out coming videos because what I'm about to show you will make you see through people like they're made of glass.